Let's talk about that.
What they're also seemingly now trying to do is claim that the gusher is basically a hole in the ocean floor where the seabed cracked. And this is very sophisticated PR stuff.
So their stock is headed where, ultimately, in your opinion?
Well, unless they raise $1 trillion, then I'm not sure $1 trillion will clean up the Gulf. Or they say to the government, no, we were kidding. We would never clean up the Gulf. So you guess.
Well, I was talking to Jim Rickards about this. We're beginning to see BP sell assets. There's a lot of misinformation.
They don't have a lot to sell, actually.
But there's a lot of misinformation out there. They talk about cash flow. This is the cash flow you need for infrastructure and safety things.
Yeah.
And, Matt, they have a bad track record on safety anyway because they probably don't have enough CapEx allocated to that to begin with. So you can't...
They don't have a bad track record. They have an awful track record.
Right, so you can't divert that CapEx.
No.
You can cut a little bit of it. Don't get me wrong.
No, this is a company that basically had an unsustainable future long before Macondo.
Right, but as you begin to sell the assets, really, as Rickard said to me, the company is in liquidation, really.
But once it becomes known that there's no way to fix the leak, then people start realizing that you better file a claim right now, and the claims could come in so fast. I mean, I could easily envision the claims exceeding $100 billion.
Well, that would be it. They would be done.
Sure. I mean, I don't know what you could liquidate BP for, but not a lot, because there are not a lot of assets that don't have more liabilities than they do worth.
Right. So what I'm saying to you, though, is if I'm a buyer and I'm coming in and I'm shopping BP assets, there's a liability that maybe comes attached with any purchases that I make.
Well, there's a pretty good rumor that Apache's going to buy the North Slope, which is, and they ought to, because BP shouldn't be on the North Slope. And Apache's a very good company, so that might give BP $7 or $8 billion.
Right, but as Apache buys that, is there an inherent liability taking that asset?
On the North Slope.
But what I'm saying is that as BP is liquidating, can't people come back to the Apache asset that they bought and said, sorry, you bought this, but meanwhile there were all these claims piling up and you never should have bought it to begin with?
That's a bankruptcy question, but I think basically they'd probably be okay if they did it fast. I think the United States government should attach all BP's assets.
Is the government doing the right thing here, the wrong thing?
I don't. First of all, I think the government must be in total confusion because, unfortunately, we have let BP insidiously control the news. And I've watched these guys on television so confidently telling that the problem is over. And I gather from a couple of friends up here that know him personally that Admiral Thad Allen is one of the finest public servants we have. And, his biggest mistake is he probably doesn't realize people are lying. We don't have a lot of public servants that start out saying, I'm going to assume I'm being lied to.
Right, but what I'm saying to you is it always struck me as odd from the beginning. There was this camera down there, and everybody could watch this leak happening.
Well, that was because BP was very clever.
Right, but what I'm saying is you have everybody watching that, and meanwhile you're saying it's really a bigger leak, and it's on the ocean floor.
But again, I have the advantage of the fact, I spent my first 10 years raising all the money and doing all the mergers that created Oceanarian, which is who have 8 of the 12 ROVs. So to me, I know what an ROV can do. It looks straight ahead for 25 feet. But by caption on the ROV, there were no other eyeballs. So no one else could actually see until finally NOAA decided something's fishy going on. So they brought their research vessels out, and they discovered these odd layers of black crude at the bottom through their unmanned subs. But BP kept saying, you guys are lying. There aren't those. We've investigated that. Well, they hadn't. They just plain hadn't. So the perjury that's gone on has just been astonishing. Because I've been so visible in this, I get all the latest stuff including some stupid things, but including a lot of really good data.
Right, but do you have some whistleblowers coming forward to you that are trying to get stuff to you?
Yep.
What are they saying to you?
They're saying, help me. I need some help. Some of the oceanographers on these research vessels have said, Mr. Simmons, I'm so proud of you, but I need your help. I'm having my professional career tarnished by saying I'm lying about this just to get money.
So if we go back to BP stock just for a minute, in your mind, that's a stock that's worth zero.
In my opinion, it is, but that's just my opinion. Maybe it's worth 25 cents.
They're already being looked at from a criminal perspective, and then the damages are much greater, and yet they have this thing trading at 37 and change.
Well, that's because they've convinced the world that the leak's over, and it wasn't a big deal to start out with. And since they've already announced also publicly that they're going to sue all the vendors, all their partners for gross negligence, people just read that and say, gosh, I intuitively always thought BP must be clean.
But if it turns out in the end that they were covering things up and they were lying, then that's more criminal charges against them.
Sure it is, yeah. But once you get in the hole, you probably don't remember this, but I'm 67. So when I was a youngster in Utah, there was a guy that ran for the 1st district in Utah as a Republican congressman when Ike was elected, and his name was Douglas Stringfellow. And the reason he got elected is he told this incredible story about how he was a courageous prisoner of war in the Korean War. He had his fingernails ripped off, and they broke his legs, his foot was wired on crutches, and he was in the last stage of his 2nd term, running for a 3rd term, when Ralph Edwards on This Is Your Life had him on This Is Your Life. And within hours, people started calling him insane. Doug Stringfellow was never in the Korean War. He was in a remedial care facility in Brigham City, Utah. So for about a decade, to lie was to be called a Stringfellow. So once you start lying, it's really hard. A small lie becomes a big lie becomes a bigger lie.
So if you're consulting the government and they come to you and say, Matt, what do we do? Do you say round these guys up, put them in a cage, and then let's start really, okay, tell me what you tell the government to do.
First of all, keep BP off the air. Make them, stop letting them waste money advertising. Have the military take over and have the service companies report to the military. The military are worried about that because they say, well, we don't know anything about this. You don't have to. BP doesn't either. The technology and know-how is all in the vendors. And the people at BP claim have actually made the problem. And I'm passing this on through some elected officials who pass it on to the administration because I don't really know anyone in the administration.
You're becoming familiarized with methane gas. Is it an overreaction then to evacuate the Gulf states?
First of all, what I have suggested to several people that are really trying to organize a better response to this, in Louisiana in particular, is they ought to basically get some medical experts that understand methane gas, because there have to be some people, germ warfare people, and say, if the winds blow in, how far in are people in harm's way? Rather than have them eat gas. If it's only 7 miles, then I'd say I'd have everyone within 10 miles of the coast of the Gulf evacuate. I'd err by 30%. If it's 25 miles, I'd have them evacuate, because once the storm comes, then there'll be no way to evacuate because you'll have no power, you'll have no gas. And then you're just sitting there like ducks in a bucket.
Is there a cover-up right now, meaning are people dying and they're in hospitals and they're dying and we're not being told?
Well, that was this odd story on CNN that I'd really like you to follow up and let me know what you find.
Can you just very quickly, for listeners globally, can you just talk about that, Matt, what you heard there?
Well, it was, I believe, a week ago tonight on the Anderson Cooper show, which I think he's done a spectacular job of covering this. And for a guy that kind of looked like a dilettante from afar, my heart goes out to him. But one of his people interviewed these 2 female reporters for NPR. And they told the story about the fact they wanted to trace down this rumor. This is the first time I'd heard any of this, that in the medical clinics of Venice, Louisiana, and Grand Isle, which are these 2 little tiny villages at the very mouth of where the Mississippi River comes into the Gulf of Mexico, that they were both chock full of people that were extremely sick or dying or maybe even dead. So they got in their car and they drove down. They're 8 miles apart. And they were astonished to find that both facilities were ringed by armed National Guard to keep people away.
Now, Matt, let's talk about that for just a second, because why would you ring a facility with the National Guard and prevent entry unless you've got something there you don't want exposed?
Obviously, something odd. And what's also odd is there's no evidence, as far as I know, that the National Guard have been called up. So these are obviously people that are members of National Guard units that decided to wear their uniforms. They actually suggested on that story that these might well have been BP employees that were asked to wear their military uniforms.
Just so I understand this, though, Matt, you're saying if you were advising the government right now, you'd find the penetration from the air onshore, you'd take a 30% error rate, and you would evacuate those states, and your big concern here is loss of life.
Yeah, I would first of all get somebody to figure out if and when a storm blows in, assume there's going to be a vast amount of methane, and way more than what we're seeing coming out of the scum now. How far does it move? How much time do you have? Can we get gas masks? If you can't, you better start evacuating today, because I know, Houston, after Katrina, we had Rita barreling towards us. And Mayor White, who's one of the most competent public officials we've ever had, made the mistake of trying to evacuate Houston. And within about 4 hours, we ran out of gas. So when Ike came, they did a totally different assessment. They actually asked most people to stay at home because they realized that with it's the 4th largest city in the United States, you can't evacuate it.
Okay, so you're saying the logistics then of an evacuation are messy business. It requires a tremendous amount of fuel and logistical.
And it takes weeks to do, so you shouldn't basically wait until all of a sudden bombs are falling.
Is the government being advised of this right now?
I don't know. I don't have any idea. I'll tell you, when